we are absolutely extraordinarily lucky to have the Katherine Armstrong, who is the Deputy Publishing Director for Adult Fiction at Simon Schuster. And she's here today to talk to us. Welcome, Katherine. I'm so excited that you're here.
Thanks, Lucy, and hi, everybody. It's really nice to be here to chat to you all. So as Lucy says, I'm Katherine Armstrong, and I'm Deputy Publishing Director for Adult Fiction at Simon and Schuster, who are one of the oldest and most respected publishers in the world. Next year, we actually celebrate our 100th anniversary. We have teams in New York, Sydney, Delhi, Toronto, and London, where I am, and we are dedicated to publishing the world's most talented authors. So Simon and Schuster UK was actually founded in 1987, and we're made up of 4 imprints. Simon and Schuster, which publishes general fiction and non-fiction, which is the sort of the imprint that I'm over. Scribner, which publishes literary fiction and non-fiction. Gallery, which is a non-fiction imprint focusing on narrative non-fiction. And last but certainly not least, children's, which covers everything from picture books to YA. And we are, along with our children's, we are publishing Publisher of the Year on our children's fiction side, as well as our general Simon Schuster fiction side, or well, publishing side. And we are Publisher of the Year for the 2nd year in a row. So this year is off to a good start. So I publish specifically crime and thriller fiction, so everything dark and dangerous and deadly. That's kind of what I cover. I've got great colleagues who are a bit more, they're light to my dark. They publish romance and what's called women's fiction, because nobody can think of a better way to phrase it, but it is very good stories that just happen to be written by women. And we also publish fiction written by men, so we cover the gamut. So I wanted to start just sort of to get into this conversation and sort of a little bit about the publishing process. I know you're all sort of writing, and I don't know how far along you are, or maybe some of you have agents, or you're out on submission with agents, or you're out on submission with publishers. But I do a lot of these talks, and I always find that the publishing process itself can be quite enigmatic. And a lot of people go, it's just this one thing, and there's a lot of different departments that go together to make the publishing process up and to produce the books that we publish. So I just wanted to sort of spend a few minutes to sort of telling you a little bit about that, and hopefully you know, demystifying some of it for you. So you might not, because you might not be familiar with the process by which a manuscript becomes a book on the shelves in bookstores. So a standard 12-month outline can be found, or what I'm going to go through now, really. So the process begins once you and your agent, if you have one, agree a deal with a Simon Schuster editor. So you may already have met the editor, like myself, for example, during the acquisitions process, which is the process by which, you know, I've been sent the manuscript by an agent, and I've read it and I've shared it in-house, and I've decided to acquire it in order to publish it. So sometimes I meet the author before I make the offer, sometimes I don't. It very much depends. But in any event, sort of the editor will get in touch once the deal has been agreed, so that, you know, we can begin to discuss edits, the all-important edits. And the editorial process is likely to include both structural and line edits. So the first thing I suppose I have to say is your editor is only there to make the book the best it can be. Any edits are suggestions, and so don't feel that your editor is saying you must do this. It's a conversation, it's a dialogue between, you know, myself as an editor and my authors. I'm like, what do you think about this? I won't necessarily rewrite anything because I want it to be in the author's voice. But the structural edits then briefly are edits that affect the entire manuscript. So that would be potentially combining 2 characters into one, cutting a portion of the work if it feels like it's too long. Basically, I'm looking for the beginning, the middle, and the end to flow, that narrative arc to flow as much as possible and to be as readable as possible. Because sometimes, in fact, I'm just finishing one at the moment. It's 110,000 words. And so I'm going to make some suggestions where bits can be trimmed because it feels in places it's a little bit, what I would refer to as a little bit flabby. You don't necessarily need all the detail. During the line edit phase, then that's a bit more, sort of literally does what it says on the tin. It's word by word. It's making suggestions on the micro scale. So the best way to think about it, structural edit is macro, line edit is micro. And that could just be me making suggestions in terms of words or paragraphs, shifting them around, trimming them here, suggesting different words or phrases, but also ensuring the timeline works on a page by page basis. If, for example, it's a crime novel and that kind of timeline is important. So that process can take weeks or months and should be considered, as I said, a conversation between you and your editor, because we're both working to make sure the final product best represents your work to the very best of everybody's ability. So once you're satisfied with the manuscript, the editor will send it to a freelance copy editor. They used to be copy editors in-house. They've pretty much all gone freelance now. So what they do is they'll pick up any lingering issues. They're sort of a fresh pair of eyes. Because, if you and your editor have gone back and forward, say, for 3 edits, for example, you can't necessarily see the wood for the trees anymore. So this is a fresh pair of eyes who will pick up anything that you or the editor have missed, and but also will put in house style. So they will code up the manuscript so that when it goes to the typesetter, it looks the way it should look. And every publishing house has a house style, which is how paragraphs are laid out, how chapter headings are, styled, all that kind of thing. So it's kind of the nitty gritty. And a copy edit will take probably about 3 to 4 weeks. And then once that's done, it'll go back to you as the author, because a lot of the time the copy editor might have some queries that you will need to go through and find out whether or not you want to make the changes that are suggested, or if you're happy with them, or maybe something else might pop up. So you'll have a week or 2 to go through that, and then it gets sent to the typesetter. So the copy edit stage, it's much easier to make those major changes before it's typeset, because once it's typeset, it's paginated. So any significant change means that the pagination, as in the number of pages that will be bound to a book, if that changes, that needs to be double checked and triple checked, and can just add to the costs of the publisher. So once it comes back from being typeset and it's lovely, it then goes into so from production, they're called first pass pages, and it goes then to yourself as the author to take another final look, and it goes to the proofreader. And again, much like with the copy editor, that's probably 3 to 4 weeks, and then it will you'll have a chance to kind of do the proofreaders sort of again the final pair of eyes. And they will just make sure that, if Marjorie's eyes are green on page 3, that they're still green by page 303 and they haven't suddenly turned brown. So things like that. And that's kind of the sort of the publishing editorial process. And then it goes on to everything like marketing, publicity, and sales, and all the people that make up the rest of the publisher. But I see we're getting some questions in that might have to do with what I've just been talking about. So Lucy, do you want to?
Absolutely. So the first one comes from Rebecca Miller. What trends are you seeing what publishers are looking for at the moment, but specifically in crime and thriller?
in crime and thriller, I'm seeing kind of clever crime fiction, that kind of Magpie Murders, Anthony Horowitz style, sort of a bit more thinking. I'm seeing sort of a bit more of a blend of genre as well. For example, I published a debut in January called In the Blink of an Eye, which is a high concept procedural, which is about a detective, one human, one hologram, because the hologram is an AI detective. So that kind of looking at different aspects of the genre. There's a lot coming out that are sort of horror blend, supernatural thrillers, where those are making a comeback. So just something that's pushing the boundaries a bit more than, I would say, a sort of more straightforward psychological thriller or suspense, domestic suspense.
That's absolutely fantastic. You obviously, are able to see the trends that are coming up, having that wonderful procedural that you've got coming up. Right. So one of the things I have to say before I go to the next question is, that is so exciting to hear about your developmental part of your editing process. Yes, I did listen to all the rest of it, but I was smiling so much when you were talking about how you went through your developmental, because it just sings so beautifully with Fictionary. Right, on to the next question. So this is from, let's go to, from Jothre. Would you ever consider picking a self-published book?
We have done in the past, actually. A colleague of mine, Molly Crawford, he picked up an author called Elena Arma, who wrote the Spanish Love Deception, the American Roommate Experiment, and she was and is one of the TikTok book talk authors that were and she was ticking along nicely, and hadn't had the breakout, but it was, she was getting the hits. And I have to admit, I'm not up on TikTok because I'm too old for TikTok. I feel TikTok is the young people talk to me about it in the office. I also feel crime fiction tends to be sort of 30, 35 plus readers who don't do TikTok. So it's I'm not the expert. Molly is the expert on it. But she picked her up and she's doing really well for us. In terms of myself, I haven't, but that is genuinely because of time. I get sent so many submissions from agents, and I have my own authors who are sending me edits to do. So I'm just coming out of the back of actually 9 back-to-back edits. So I don't have the time it would take to really investigate the self-published sort of authors who I know are on Amazon and do have great followings, and there will be great books. But that is not to say that people, other editors, would do that. We do one-day submissions. My colleague Sarah Jade runs that, and we will be doing one-day submissions for crime, which will be next June for National Crime Reading Month. But we do them sort of sporadically, and I know some other publishers do. It tends to be like a day where you can sort of get in touch via Twitter or other social media, and it's basically, here's my pitch, do you want to see it? And then the editor will say yes or no if it sounds like something that they would like to see. So it's good to sort of keep an eye out for those if you can. They're not, I think we've just had one that SJ was running. And like I say, we'll probably do one specifically for crime next June. But we do run them sort of sporadically throughout the year.
That's brilliant. I think that answered Eric's question. Do you need an agent?
It helps. And I think mostly because the agents spend a lot of time meeting with editors, so they know an editor's taste. They know what an editor is looking for. And also they will do the nitty gritty deal for you as an author. They will be your point of contact. So if something is going wrong, or you're not sure about something and you don't want to make a fuss, they are the person that you can send in to be the bad guy, which means then that your relationship with your editor and the publishing company will remain lovely. So it's not that thankfully very few things go wrong, but you know that sometimes it's hard to have that conversation direct in terms of, say, advance level, royalty rate. You know, all the stuff that if you don't have an agent, you really have to know what you're doing. The Society of Authors do offer some help and advice to authors on this, but if you are looking to move into writing as a career, then I would say getting an agent just takes that pressure off you to become, because you then have to be everything, and it's exhausting. But they come with their little black book of editors and who would say, oh, I know Katherine is looking for this and you're writing this, so I'm going to send it to her because I think that you and she will work well together. That's what that's why you pay them your 15 to 20%. And you don't, just to say, you don't pay them anything until you get a deal and you get paid. So if there's anyone who says, I will represent you, but you pay me $5,000, that's not a real agent. Don't listen to them.
That's brilliant. Fantastic advice there, Katherine. Thank you so much. Right. So from Tara, we've got, what kind of things make you think a particular author is a good one to work with and who you'd want to work with in the future?
I would say I'm lucky in the sense that all the authors I've worked with so far, touch wood, have all been lovely, and I can have a chat with them. I can be open and honest with them. I don't feel that, you know, what they're looking for is completely radically different to what we're looking for, because ultimately as an editor, as a publisher, I am looking to get the best work out of my authors and publish it to the best of my ability to make sure that they can continue to publish. So in terms of that kind of long term, it's somebody that, yeah, I kind of gel well with. They don't need to be my best friend, but my rule of thumb is if I feel I could go out and have a drink with them, or I wouldn't mind being stuck in a lift with them, then that's kind of my rule of thumb for, yes, that's fine.
That's fabulous, Katherine. Absolutely brilliant. Right. So from Rebecca Miller again, do publishers appreciate authors who've had their manuscript professionally edited before submitting to them, or would it put them off an acquiring editor?
It'll never put me off. No, I mean, I would say that what are you paying that person to do that an editor, once you get them, wouldn't do? That would be my only thing in terms of laying out money in advance. If you get an agent, there's a lot of agents would edit it before it even gets sent out. Again, depends on the agent. Some agents will be focused just on the deal, less on the editing. And then there are other agents who will be editing and the deal. So that just depends on sort of who you see. But it wouldn't put me off at all. But it would be under the proviso that when you think it's been edited, it possibly might still need some more editing. I think that's the one thing a lot of author friends say to me. They don't realize when they get an agent, they think, great, that's done. And then a lot of the time the agent gets them to do some edits before it gets sent to the publisher. And then the publisher, they think, great, that's done. And then the publisher asks them to do some more edits. So it's only ever done when it's printed. I would say. And even then, I've got to stop some authors from trying to rewrite it when it's on the press. It's like, no, you can't do that. So, but then a lot of authors tell me that, you know, once it's out there and it's in the wild, they're like, they never want to read it again. It's done. They're moving on to the next book.
Okay, before I go to the community questions, can I just ask you how you began your career in publishing and what drew you to it?
What drew me to it? I have, funny enough, always been a big reader, specifically crime. My gran introduced me to Agatha Christie when I was about 10, but I started a few years before that on sort of like Nancy Drew, the Hardy Boys, that kind of thing. So I always liked the mystery aspect of it. So I did my undergraduate degree in English literature at Queen's University in Belfast. And then it got sort of third and final year where they bring you into, the big lecture hall and they stand there and they tell you, now, you're about 6 months away from graduating. What do you want to do in your life? And so it was that kind of panic of going, do I really want to go and get a job now? No, I don't want to. So I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. So I ended up going and doing a Master of Philosophy and Publishing at the University of Stirling in Scotland. And that kind of thought, I'll defer for, any big decisions for a year. And then I worked in general admin and did various things, and then finally got a part-time contract at Faber and Faber as an editorial assistant in 2005. And I was there for about 10 and a half years. And I worked across poetry, fiction, non-fiction, and then specialized in crime. And then I moved to do maternity cover at Little Brown Book Group, the Sphere imprint, and then I went to Bonnier Books UK for four years, and I've been at Simon Schuster for 2.5 years now. So it was kind of that, like once I was in it, I knew that, yeah, I definitely wanted to do that, and I specifically wanted to be an editor and find the books that I'd loved as a child, and to find books like that for adults to read. So, yeah.
Oh, that's absolutely fabulous, Katherine. That goes so brilliantly to the next question. What are you reading at the moment?
What am I reading at the moment? I have to admit, I don't have a lot of time to read for pleasure. I've currently got 70 submissions on my Kindle, so I'm working my way through those. I have got a second draft of an author's just re-delivered a second draft, so I need to edit that. So it's very much work for me at the moment. But I have got, I got a proof of the new Chris Whitaker book. So I published Chris when I was at Bonnier Books. I published a book called We Begin at the End, which got a lot of awards. It was Crime Novel of the Year. It won a Gold Dagger. It sold in America. So I'm sadly not his editor any longer, but I have got a proof of his new one for his new publishing company, which is Orion. So I'm looking forward to reading that, hopefully starting this weekend.
Well, Katherine, it sounds like you keep very strong relationships, even with people, the clients you've had from way back when. And that's absolutely amazing. What advice from Glenn Loveland do you have for doing speed dating agent pitch events as a writer?
Oh, that's a good one. I've been a dragon on one of those dragon pen ones at Harrogate in bloody Scotland, and I know how nerve-wracking they are. So I would say deep breath beforehand. Keep it succinct if you can. If you can do an elevator pitch, so that is sort of summing up your book in basically the length it takes to do to go from one floor to another. If you have that, and you just keep it as succinct as possible and have one pitch line that they will remember, that's really like memorable, is really helpful. Because if they're seeing several, you want to be able to stand out.
Brilliant, absolutely fantastic. So Dawn said, what are you tired of seeing? Tropes, characters, etc.
Personally, I've seen a lot of bad psychotherapists. Very much that kind of sort of silent patient-esque, are they a good psychotherapist or are they not? And it's like, clearly not. It's a crime novel. They're going to be ghosting you or doing something bad. So I've seen a lot of that. So I've got a bit of ennui on that, but that's just my personal opinion. And again, sort of the husband did it or the best friend did it, those kind of things, unless it's cleverly done. I'm missing kids stuff as well. I think I'm looking for something that I feel is very fresh, because as kind of a lifelong reader, but also being in this industry nearly 20 years, and actually I was a Waterstones bookseller as well for a year before that. So I kind of feel like I've read a lot in this area, so I keep seeing similar things. When you can guess by chapter 2 who'd done it, that sort of thing. But yeah, something fresh is what I'm looking for.
Well, that'll be our new saying, the Armstrong chapter 2 test. And if
Yes.
we can guess who it is in chapter 2, then it needs to be revised and rewritten so that it's stronger. That's brilliant. Thank you so much for that insight. So this is from Ingrid Wimple. Hello, Katherine. Question: what causes the lengthy publication process at a publishing house?
Schedules is the short answer. The long answer is, so when you acquire a new book, and I've just taken on an author I had at Bonnier called Stuart Neville, and I'm publishing his first book in a trilogy, Blood Like Mine, next August. And the reason for that is he has an American publisher, and so we're trying to line up as much as we can. We're both publishing in August, and we will paperback roughly within a month of each other the following summer. And it is, I have got my schedule for next year for crime is sorted. It's done. I don't have any space to have anybody new in there. I'm looking for books for mid to late 2025, and I've just acquired something for 2026. And that sounds incredible. And I know you're all there going, oh my God, why? That's so long. But it is literally because I have authors who are yearly. We've got so I work on the publishing of Ruth Ware. I'm Chris Carter's editor, Nikki French, and they are book a year authors. I've got books that I acquired a couple of years ago, that I have been slotted in for various reasons, here next year. So it is just, the short answer really is publishing schedules, because what I'm looking to do when I take on any author is publish it where there are as few internal conflicts as possible in terms of books that are in a similar genre or similar themes. And actually, when you look at the publishing year, fiction doesn't do as well unless you're a massive brand in the autumn. That tends to be non-fiction gifty books for Christmas. So you really have January to September, maybe a smidgen of October for fiction and for crime. So to spread it out so that everybody gets a shot. I can't control other publishers and what they have coming out. So all I can do is control what we have and making sure that every author has some room to breathe as much as I can on what is quite a tight a tight year, even if it doesn't seem like it.
That's fabulous. Thank you. That is such an interesting answer that I probably never even thought about, but it's amazing. Thank you so much for that insight. So from David, bookbinder, we've got, is it a plus for a book to be the first in a series? And if it is, how developed is it advisable for the subsequent books to be?
If it's going to be a series, then yes, having the first one is great. It's harder to take on mid-series unless it's massively successful. Like if Richard Osman came to me and said, Katherine, I want you to publish the Thursday Murder Club from now on, I would go, Richard, I will do it, but just for you. Because it's massively successful. So it does depend on that in terms of taking it to sales and giving them and marketing and publicity and giving them something fresh to talk about. But in terms of a first book in a series, yeah, that's usually not a problem at all. And I would say I tend to do 2-book deals, particularly if I know that it's going to be a series. So you wouldn't have to have it finished at time of acquisition, but it would be useful to have an idea of what it would be. And I would always say, actually, and I think a lot of authors give this advice to other authors, which is by the time that first book is published, have the second book written, because you do go into publicity, you know, and you get involved, you go to festivals, you do all sorts of things to publicize book one, and book two might get a little bit neglected by that point. But also book one, you tend to be series, you want them as regularly as possible, so book a year, so that the more you have of book two written, the easier it will be.
That is absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. Right. So from Barry T, we've got, how important is a writer's resume when considering publishing a novel, or is it purely based on the manuscript? If a first-time novelist has never been published, is that a strike against them? Asking for a friend.
No, it's not at all. I mean, if you have had short stories published anywhere, absolutely mention that. If you've won any awards for writing, that's great. I wouldn't mention that your mum loves it or your partner, because that's a given. But things that are relevant, definitely mention. But I would say that it doesn't matter if you're a complete newbie. I'm basically, you could have won a plethora of awards, but unless you can write on the page, and I get it, that's not going to do me any favors, really. You know, it's not going to help me. So it's always very much about the writing. But if you have that, like I said, you know, you've won something or other, that's nice to have. That's great. And actually that's something then that, you know, I'd feed into publicity and say, oh, you could maybe approach this person because they won this award and that person was a judge, that kind of thing. But no, it's all about the writing.
That's absolutely fabulous. And this Q&A has been so wonderful, because the questions keep on following one another. Katherine, your answers just inspire us all. So Jothy's asked, how much of a book do you usually have to read before you think, this is great? Is it just a few chapters or more? Do you skip around with those 79, was it, on your Kindle?
I think my rule of thumb normally is I will read, for every submission, I will read at least 50 pages. Now, crime novels tend to be 300 to 400. So by that time, if I'm hooked, I'll read on and I'll finish. But if I'm not, then at least I get a good sense of it. And I might skip to the end and kind of see. That tends to be about 20-25% when I'm reading on a Kindle. But usually, as I'm sure everybody knows, is sort of, you know, the first chapter, the first paragraph, the first page really is sort of like, will get you in there. And then, you know, the pacing will keep you going. But I've read so much that I can tell that, you know, this is definitely one I want to keep reading, or it's good, but it's not necessarily for me, so I'm going to stop. And that, but yeah, I try and read as much as I can, but it's pretty obvious when it's not going to connect with me.
So this is off script. So when you read a book and you go, oh my gosh, do you have a happy dance?
I usually have a little squeal, but only in private. Yeah. When I read Chris Whitaker's We Begin at the End, I did have a little squeal because it was just so good. And I said to him, I don't cry, but you made me well, and that's the biggest compliment I can give you. So.
Oh, amazing. Oh, that's absolutely marvelous. Right. So from Tara, at what stage in the process is it helpful for an author to provide suggestions about what they'd like to see on the book cover?
So that's quite, well, relatively far down the line. Amazon and other retailers usually tend to put things up about 9 months in advance of publication, so they're searchable for pre-order. We try and have covers for then, if not a bit before, because our sales team will be selling, like, for example, our sales team are about to go out in September to start selling for next year, as in Q2, which is April, May, June next year. So we have to have them as far in advance, because basically if they don't have a cover when they go out, it's very hard to get retailers to engage with them, because they see so many books. So from an author point of view, once the manuscript is basically being edited, we launch books. We have like a meeting where publicity, marketing, sales, everybody is there, and editorial will launch the book. We position it to the company, and that does say this is what it is, this is where the market is, and we will discuss at that point sort of thoughts about the cover. I usually will have asked the author before that time if they have any thoughts for it, and we'll feed that in, and that's a conversation again ongoing. So once it's been briefed, then it goes and get probably about a month, I would say, till we get first visuals. But the author wouldn't necessarily see those first visuals, because a lot of the time you get maybe 15, and that's just too much, particularly when you go to sales and they will say no to about 14 of them. So you then will cut it down and develop the artwork, and then show it to the author and the agent for hopefully for approval. But then they do get input on that. So it's kind of, I would say, about a year in advance that there's a conversation. But it's a conversation and taking into account what the author wants, but ultimately as well, it's got to be the right book for the market.
Absolutely fantastic. Right. So we've got Glenn Loveland here. If you have an idea for a series of 5 books, is it more likely that an agent than a publisher will only acquire the first to see the response?
Well, the agent will take you on, not the work. They're taking you on as an author. So they will, if you say, I've got this, 5 books in me, they would potentially send it to a publisher, to an editor, as this is a 5-book, continuing story. But the publisher may not take on 5 books at once. They might do 2-book deal and see where it goes from there. So it could be that. Now, if it's 5 books, it might be wrong, but is it sci-fi, fantasy, potentially? So that is different in that sense, because I know some of those, the epics, some of those publishers would probably do more like 3, 4, 5, potentially a 5-book deal.
So I think it was memoir that he was talking about.
Right, memoir. Then that is that's something to be discussed with the agent and then with the publisher.
Well, that's absolutely fantastic to find out about the different genres as well. Right, so Hope's asks, does Simon Schuster publish novellas?
The Scribner list, my colleagues on the Scribner list would tend to do some of that. Not many, I would say. They do a few short story collections as well. It's not an area of the market I have to admit I have any experience in. I've published a couple of short story collections for crime, but no novellas. But I would say that it's possible. They certainly look at it.
That's fantastic. So Glenn's asked, with major publishers, how does the PR, event, speaker series work? Does the publisher provide the flights and accommodation?
So for things like festivals, if you get invited to a festival, like I've just come back at the end of July from the Harrogate International Festival, and that is if we have authors there, the festival usually covers at least a night, sometimes some travel, and we will you pay for either the travel up and I'd say another night if the author wants to stay for longer. If it's authors deciding to go and do that by themselves and they're not up for a panel, then that is for the author to pay, just because, you know, as with everything, there is a finite budget, and it's got to be prioritized by the people who are physically there to, you know, pitch their work on a panel. Abroad, that is, if you like, say, America wanted you, that would be probably they would pay potentially. But again, it's case by case basis in terms of what it is you're going over for. I hope that helps.
So Tara's asked, do editors like yourself have preferred agents that they're more likely to read or prioritize submissions from?
There are some agents who specifically deal, you know, do a lot of crime. And I wouldn't necessarily prioritize them, but I would definitely, you know, put their submissions as close to the top as I could, because I would know their taste and I know who they have on their rosters. And I, you know, I would, these are agents that I feel confident that would be sending me the stuff that I know they know I would like to see. So I know there are other agents who I don't know, and yeah, I read everything, but in terms of prioritizing, I maybe gonna hedge for that there.
It's fantastic. So Kestrel's asked, does Simon Schuster publish cozy or para-cozy mysteries?
We don't do para-cozy at the moment. I have to say I've not really seen anything. Nothing's come through to me. But we have done a cozy in the past, I believe, and I've got a cozy coming next June called The Dog Park Detective. So that's going to be good fun. I'm looking forward to that. So I'm starting to see a few more cozies come in. I know that it's quite prevalent in America. And over here, we have always had cozy, or what is termed cozy, because there's the Agatha Racing series from MC Beaton, and people like that. But I haven't seen a lot in the past. I think it's starting to make a comeback because of Richard Osman, because of Reverend Richard Coles. We're starting to see more readers actually want something. And actually, I think also, dare I mention the P word, the pandemic. I think a lot of people who are crime readers turned away from things that are very dark, and they want something that has a crime and a mystery element, but is maybe a little bit more lighthearted. So I think that's helped the rise of the cozy, or the re-rise.
Right. I've got a message from Glenn, which is, I've attended a ton of online talks like this, and this is truly the best ever. Real insight. Thank you, Katherine and Fictionary. That's amazing. Thank you so much for saying that, Katherine. You have been so generous with all, but we've still got some questions. So if you don't mind, we'll go for it.
Yeah.
If you're acquiring 2 years in advance, would you ever recommend writing for market?
No. Short answer, because I don't think you can. I think markets change. So the book that I mentioned earlier, the sort of AI detective one, In the Blink of an Eye, I acquired that in 2021. That was one of the first submissions I got when I joined S&S, and that was the first thing I acquired. And I couldn't have predicted then that AI was going to take off And I basically, like I said earlier, it was due to scheduling, and it was because it was a debut and I wanted to give it a long, what's known as a long lead for that. So, and actually I thought I wouldn't get it because the author balked at it being a January 2023 publication, when it was at that time April 2021. And I had to sort of explain to her what I wanted to do, which was have proofs at the Harrogate Festival to hand out, which we did last summer. I wanted to work on the manuscript first. I basically got a lot of things to make it sort of buzzy, and make it a word of mouth, and it paid off because it was a between the covers pick in March this year. But I couldn't have predicted, because it was about AI, and what I enjoyed about it was that AI element. But AI is so around now, everybody's talking about it, but I didn't know that in 2021. Or maybe I should say I did. Maybe I like, no, I knew that, and I predicted that. But so I would say, don't write the book that you want to write. Have somebody else worry about the market, because the markets change. And you know, as you were saying about sort of cozy there, you know, 5 years ago, I don't think if you wrote, you know, if you said I'm going to write a cozy, you couldn't have predicted that it was going to take off, and it took a while for it to kind of come back to what it was like 20 years ago. So yeah, write the book that you want to read, and you want to write, and don't worry. It's a publisher's job to worry about where you position it.
Fabulous advice. Write the book you want to read. Absolutely go with that. So, Jo, what do you think of pitching to an agent in a country other than yours, thinking specifically about crime noir rights issues aside?
I have an author whose primary agent is in America, and they are based in the UK. And a lot of the American agencies will have sub-agents in the UK. So actually the submission will come through a UK agent. But then when you acquire, you talk to the American agents as well. So I would say absolutely. But again, I'd probably caveat that with, depends on what you want from an agent, because you do have to then take into account time difference. And do you want to meet them in person? Is that going to be easy for you to do? Zoom is great, thank God for Zoom, but something to be said for sort of like looking somebody in the eye properly. So I would say, don't discount it, but definitely have a think about what sort of agent you want. But if if you're a traveler and now everything's open again and you fancy it, I would say, yeah, definitely.
That's absolutely fantastic. Right. So David's asked, what is the range of advances typically offered a debut novelist, and what determines where someone falls in that range?
I mean, I can't really put a number on it because it varies so substantially, and it's about that book at that moment for that time. So if it's what feels like a zeitgeisty book, and it's something that has caught a few editors, and there can be a flurry. A lot of agents like to try and drum up enough enthusiasm for an auction. Which means that, sort of editors it becomes about money and beauty. It's sort of, what are you being offered? And it's not just, the top line. But then other authors might have a more modest advance, but will do equally well. So I guess it's, like I said, I can't really put a specific number on it because it does vary, and it will vary. It depends on the book and the time that it's acquired.
That's brilliant. So Tara's asked, is it very rare for books to go to auction? These questions are just falling in straight after each other. I do think you can see the future, Katherine. And when do you decide which books to try and get into book crates?
So, like I said, a lot of agents like to try and do auctions. They're not always successful, I have to say. A lot of the time you feel that it's an agent trying to, you know, drum up a lot of excitement that isn't necessarily there. And that's nothing to do with the book. That's just they've overpitched it. So there are still quite a number. I would say particularly probably more in non-fiction at the moment. I know as an editor myself, and I say this to agents, shamefully behind on my reading. And I know that a lot of other editors are as well. And I think that is a hangover from the pandemic. But when something exciting comes in and you read it and you know it's really good and you really, really want it, and then the agent says, oh, you know, 3 other editors are taking it to acquisition, you know, so that kind of does mean, what, you know, I'm going to move fast on it. But it doesn't actually mean that there will necessarily be an auction, because taking to acquisition doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to make an offer. So, and what was the second part? Sorry.
When do you decide which books you try and get into your book crate?
Well, at that point, if I, you know, having read it and decided this is the one that I want to go for, and usually at that point I'll take it to Editorial. We have traditionally, I don't know why, Editorial is always on a Wednesday, and that's been every publisher I've ever worked at. Who knew? Back on in my Faber days, just to segue from it, I've heard that T.S. Eliot, when he was at Faber editor, obviously the poetry editor, and they used to have the only woman, apart from the secretary that was allowed in the editorial meetings, was the woman who brought in the drinks trolley. So while I'd like a drinks trolley, that I kind of feel that we get completely off track in editorial meetings if we had one. So I take it to Editorial, and at that point I am pitching it in terms of where do I see it sitting in the market, how much I would want to offer for it, what rights I would want to go for in terms of agents will say UK Commonwealth rights only are available. Sometimes that can be for the right amount negotiated to world rights. It depends. And then I would, yeah, like I said, sort of give the pitch. And then from Editorial, it goes to what we call pre-acquisitions. And that's on a Friday morning at 9:30. And that is with sales director, marketing director, and publicity director. And after Editorial on Wednesday, I would have sent it to these people. They would have dipped in. We will have a very frank, open, honest conversation about, I will have created what's called a P&L, a profit and loss spreadsheet. So I will be looking at what's the price going to be, what the pub date is likely to be, how many books I think, and sales will confirm, we are likely to have for those rights. And that includes, if it's a hardback, a trade paperback, which is an export, or for Ireland, which is part of export, or wider, like Australia, India, South Africa. Paperback, ebook, but also ebook at full price, ebook at promotion price, how many of each. Ebook, when you drop the price, say you've got a $9.99 ebook, it might go to $5.99, it might be promoted at 99p. And audio, and from that then we decide publicity budget likely to be put in, marketing budget, what sales costs will be. I think a lot of people forget that we pitch to retailers, and if your book is front of store Waterstones, they have chosen it, but the publisher is paid for that. So it's, you know, all that needs to be costed in, and then if it gets the tick, it goes to acquisitions, which is a Tuesday, and you give everybody in acquisitions, that CEO, CFO, MD, everybody else who attends, they get the weekend to read. You then pitch it in acquisitions, but at that point it tends to be, if it's gone through pre-acts, it tends to be just a tick box exercise. That means that you can go and make an offer to the agent. So it's kind of, you've got a lot of eyes on it. It's not, you know, I go out for lunch at the Ivy with an agent and drop 100 grand on a book. those days are gone.
Oh, that's
I
so
never had them.
exciting. Julie said, as a newbie writer, writing her first novel, this is very inspiring. Thank you so much. Kestrel's also said, wonderfully informative. Thank you for giving your time and your knowledge. That's absolutely, we're all so grateful here. Would you consider an author from South Africa? Asked Bonnie.
Yes, absolutely. I have a Native American author. I've got a Maori author. I'm open to any and all people and writers who are great. So
united by their greatness. Right. So Bonnie's also asked, does a novel set in a foreign country have appeal?
Yes. Like I say, my New Zealand author, that's a series set in Auckland and northern New Zealand. And then the Native American author set in sort of around Colorado and Denver and on a Native American reservation that actually exists there. So yeah, and for Christina, we published Kathy Reichs, who's obviously a great sort of Canadian American writer and sets a lot of her books in Canada. So yeah, we've got everybody.
This is such valuable and encouraging information. Thank you so much. There's Lisa Taylor, one of our Fictionary Certified Story Coach editors. And then can you give the lowest debut author advance? Asks Teresa, or is that confidential?
I mean, I wouldn't know it necessarily for ours at all, and it would be confidential. I wouldn't want to speculate at all. But I would say that I know advances are important, but I would say that what's also important if you want to have a lengthy career as well is having that investment from a publisher that it might not necessarily be on the first book, but it's all about sort of continuing and building. And I know I have an author, a friend who published at another publishing company and got quite a lot for their first advance, but the book didn't do what the publisher was expecting, and they didn't do much for the second book. And I don't actually know if she's still writing. So I would say it weighing up, yes, it's great to go and be told we're going to pay you X 100,000 or whatever. But also I would say don't just look at the zeros. Look at what they're offering. Speak to your editor who's offering how are they viewing your career? Because most authors want to have a career. They don't want to just have one book published or two and then that's them, they're done. They'll take up knitting. They want to have that career going forward. So it's what is the publisher offering you that is as well as the advance.
That's fabulous. So are you seeing any knock-on effects from the cost of living crisis in book sales and book buying habits?
Yes. Footfall is down and has, because at the end of the day, books are a luxury item. They might be a necessity for me, but they are a luxury item for most people. And so I would say that the hardback market has taken a bit of a chunk at the moment. Certainly across the board, we're seeing good sales, but not where they were potentially even a year ago in that sense. And certainly with the rise of book talk, and you're seeing the top 10 bestseller list have been dominated by big brand authors and book talk. So authors that you would potentially again have seen a year ago, sort of the step down from the big brand authors. They might go in for a week and then they're out, whereas a year ago they might go into the top 10 for a few weeks. So the market is changing, and a lot of that is to do as well with cost of living, because if you are a buyer, if you're shopping in Asda, for example, are you likely to pick up a book by an unknown, or are you likely to go, there's a Lee Child, an Andrew Child, I read him before and I know what they're like. So it's trying to find new ways of reaching readers that don't necessarily go into Waterstones, for example. So the Works is on most high streets. They've got, I think, 500 and something shops, and they're very much positioning themselves in a kind of Smith's area of the market, because you can go in there and pick up, your art stuff for your kid, and 3 for 10 quid paperbacks, and you're more likely potentially to take I want two paperbacks from somebody I know, and I'll take a chance on somebody I don't know. So it's different ways of getting to readerships. But yeah, we were seeing cost of living biting a little bit. I think the bookseller did a piece on it last month.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I do actually think that you can see into the future, because the next question, which is probably going to be our last question because we're coming up for the hour, do hardbacks still sell, or are ebooks and audio taking over?
So, like I said, they sell to a level, certainly for gifting and certainly for big brands, and also sort of debut. But ebooks, yes. I would say actually audio is coming into its own a bit more. And again, this could be from the pandemic. I'm not a massive audio reader. I'm a visual reader. I can put audio books on in the background, but I couldn't actually tell you what the story is about because I just tune out. But I know a lot of people who love it. So we're seeing actually a rise in audio, and the rise of Audible. And I think other platforms are available. So yeah, we're seeing that, and ebooks are steady as ever. You see a massive spike when ebooks are 99p promotion, but they tick along nicely. They're not quite where they were in 2012, which was sort of peak ebook. And I think it had another spike in 2016, but it's buoyant.
Katherine, can I say how absolutely honoured and absolutely just thank you and wowed out by all the information that you have given us today. It's amazing. Thank you so much. Hopefully we can have you come on again in the future. It would just be so exciting, because I know that there are so many questions in here, but we don't have time for them. So thank you so much.
Not a problem. Thank you so much for having me and for listening to me go on.